we've seen sometimes Seb has kind of tantrums and the emotions get the better of him. We saw it in Baku last year, but we even saw it when he was at Red Bull, that those sort of incidents would happen, ignoring team orders and overtaking Webber for a win, that sort of thing. And in Red Bull, they would find a way of kind of letting him release and have those tantrums, and it wouldn't sort of taint him long term for the team. They'd then just get the best out of him again. That was, I think, the team being the kind of more level-headed, lower emotional register sort of approach. You look at Ferrari, it's the opposite. It's everything can be a drama. There's huge amounts of pressure. There's huge amounts of sort of emotion and passion and flair. They're words you do associate with Ferrari because it's true. You see it the way their mechanics work and the team work when they're at circuits. There's just a completely different vibe about those places, and they feel like they're all on edge all the time. And I think that means that when Seb kind of maybe, for want of a better phrase, loses it a little bit, he isn't afforded the space and the kind of time to then get over it, or just a release valve. There's a response from the team. They're not happy about it, and it gets a little bit confrontational. So I think, like you say, that has that kind of potential to combust every now and then. And what they need is to, if you look when Seb's driving at his best, when the team's happy and Vettel's happy, it's a hell of a combination. And they just can't really afford to not start strongly, because that then puts them on the back foot and builds the pressure quickly, and then the comments come in. So I think it's one of those that it's just an inherent Ferrari thing. It's why Ferrari, for all the history, the money, the extra payments they get, the desire that so many people have to work for Ferrari, it's why it doesn't always work. It's just why quite often it doesn't work at all for many brilliant names in the sport, because just the whole sort of makeup of the place doesn't allow you always to perform at your best. But when you do, the way it clicks is incredible. So I think Vettel is, you kind of see the massive swings, and I feel that's the way it's always going to be.
Chris, am I wrong to feel like Kimi Räikkönen is almost a tribute act to his former self at this point? And I say that having watched him come into Formula One with whatever it was, 20 motor races to his credit, and just astound us, and then do amazing things, whether it's Ferrari, McLaren, the leave me alone, I know what to do, Kimi from Lotus. He was our David going against the Goliaths. I haven't seen that guy in far too long, Chris, and I just don't know if that guy still exists. Am I being too nostalgic here? Am I being too maudlin? Or is whatever that really passionate fire that burned within Kimi, has that thing been extinguished? I don't know how to process Kimi. I love seeing his name on the grid, but it saddens me to think that it's been far too long since I remember a storming take-no-prisoners drive for a meaningful position in the race.
No, I totally agree with you. It's one of those kind of sad things to look further down the order and see him being comfortably beaten by his teammate and just not performing like the Kimi we knew of the mid-2000s, and like you say, even when he came back with Lotus. But I think that's just kind of a sign of his personal change. He is a much more mature guy. I mean, we still give him stick or people sort of have this kind of impression of Kimi that he gives very short answers and hates the press and everything. He's much more engaging than Vettel is these days. He gives much longer answers. He gives much more detailed, in-depth ones. Okay, he's still very monotone and he doesn't look like he's enjoying it. But when you actually listen to the words he's saying, you realise, especially knowing the Kimi that would sometimes give one-word answers, you realise that's him really trying. And understanding why he's giving that sort of answer. And I just think, he's a father now. He seems very settled. I mean, 12 months ago, you never would have thought he'd have an Instagram account. Now he's showing off everything he's doing behind the scenes. And he's just, I think, accepted that he's very near the end of his career. He's driving for the team that so many people want to drive for. He's still Ferrari's last world champion. So he's still got a big amount of weight to throw around there. But he's comfortable. And the thing with Kimi, who's always said, is he does it his own way. I think he's sat there going, well, I get paid a lot of money to drive a Formula One car for Ferrari. This is not a bad way to see out my career. Like he'd love to win, clearly, but when he doesn't, he's got a world championship. He's got multiple wins. I don't think he feels he needs to prove anything to anyone. And even if anyone felt he still did need to prove anything, he doesn't care as long as he's happy. So I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing someone with maybe a little less of the motivation, but in the same way that Kimi's always been, that he's just doing it his way. And sadly, it means we don't see that, like I say, barnstorming Raikkonen of old that would just pull off moves you never expect to see and would excite. It used to be you'd look further down the order and see Raikkonen struggling and be like, this will be great, he's going to fight back. And now you see him down there and you're like, yeah, Kimi's struggling. That's just what it is. So he's very much in Seb's shadow, and I don't think he particularly minds that. Every now and then when he's nearer the front and it doesn't go for him, I think he does. But on the whole, I think he's just quite happy with his lot, and he's going to keep going through the motions and trying to do enough while he still enjoys it. He'll keep racing. And then the second he stops enjoying it, or the second Ferrari get bored of the setup they've got, then I don't think he'll be too bitter when he walks away either.
We need brooding Finnish Morrissey, Kimi Räikkönen, not happy and content Nico Rosberg, Kimi Räikkönen. All right, so although we're recording this, I promise we won't keep score. Chris Medlin, looking at the end of the 2018 season from a Constructors' Championship standpoint, do you think Ferrari maintains the second place that they captured last year, or do you think they might move up or fall?
I think they will fall to third by the end of the year.
Ooh, well, don't tell us who's going to take second. We'll save that when we get to them to that team. Well, okay. Let's bounce around a little bit here. Let's go to, if I didn't know how to process Kimi, I definitely don't know how to process Williams Martini Racing in the final year of the Martini part of that contract. Boy, they sure have a motor that a lot of teams would love to have. They have a returning Canadian in Lance Stroll. You and I have definitely shared a lot of opinions privately about the young Montreal native. They have Sergei Sorokin joining the team, Russian driver. If they did not perform anything like we thought they would from a Constructors' Championship standpoint last year, I mean, fifth last year wasn't the end of the world, but I definitely don't think, considering what they had propelling their car and the senior talent that they had in Felipe Massa, I know that we would have expected more out of them last year. What comes to mind when you think of this organization, Chris? 2018, it's veteran gone, comparative young pups in the car, or in the cars this year. Have they done enough, or I don't want to say anything, but have they done anything really to make us think that their outcome and fortunes are going to be different this year compared to last?
No, they haven't. If I'm honest, I worry about Williams quite a lot because when I was growing up watching Damon Hill win world championships and Jacques Villeneuve win world championships, and it was such an iconic car and team. And obviously the sport's changed, and Williams isn't a big team in terms of finance and infrastructure compared to the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull these days, even McLaren, which, there I've named four teams. So fifth in the Constructors' Championship makes sense. But they were so comfortably beaten by Force India last year. That was already concerning. And then this year, the driver lineup choice is, I think it's the wrong one at the time for the team. I've got nothing against either driver's sort of ability to be on the F1 grid, actually. But as a pairing of Sorokin and Stroll with just 1 year's experience, for a team that was sliding from consecutive third-place finishes to then consecutive fifth places, but ever less competitive, they need someone who was going to sort of pick them up, grab them by the scruff of the neck and turn it round. And I think the team pinned its hopes on Paddy Lowe doing that, and the signs from testing weren't particularly encouraging. And as you say, last year, the Martini sponsorship, the car looks like it's not going to be that competitive. The drivers are still going to be inexperienced, and I'd be amazed if the drivers can turn that situation around. They're still learning. So I think they're going to really struggle. And then at the end of the season, you've got a team that gets much less money because of where it finishes in the Constructors' Championship, has less money coming in and no more title sponsor from Martini. And it's trying to convince other sponsors to come on board and say the future's bright and the trajectory is going to be a downward one and a rapidly changing downward one. So I do worry about them, actually. There's nothing I've seen so far that tells me it's going to get better anytime soon. And I had optimism when they launched the new car and Paddy Lowe was talking, and they had obviously Robert Kubica coming in as the reserve driver, and there was a feel-good story around that. And you just thought, maybe they'll get closer to Force India or challenge Force India for fourth in this coming year. And that was very much a hope rather than expectation. And you see the car on track, and it was not competitive at all so far. So they've got a massive job. And I think the thing is, it's a crucial year. They need to turn it round during the year and even if they're going to start badly, they need to finish much more strongly so they can point to recovery and signs of hope. Because without that, I think they're going to really struggle on a number of fronts to keep that as a strong outfit.
What comes to mind for me with them, and I apologize for not knowing all of the international equivalents, Chris, but at least here in, whether it is the NBA basketball, some other major sporting leagues, it's called tanking. It's where a team basically knows that their season is not going to be great. Maybe they don't have the right personnel, the right stars, etc. And they intentionally lose games knowing that it will improve their position the following season to draft one of the top picks coming out of whatever league. But basically, we're going to forfeit this season for the most part, knowing that hopefully the reasons we're forfeiting, it will help us improve in some substantial way in the longer term. That's what came to mind when hearing that Sorokin was being signed. We know that Lance Stroll brings considerable funding. If I'm trying to put a positive maybe spin, I look at this and say, okay, if the finances to compete against the biggest teams, if that's been the limiting factor, maybe you could see in this young Russian driver and the money that he brings and the money that Lance Stroll brings, in theory, they're sacrificing today for hopefully being able to make greater investments in the team for 2019's competitiveness and so on. Is that me just being drunk and pulling stuff out of my arse? Or do you think there's anything to that? Or is this just more bad decisions being piled on top of bad decisions?
I think they've done that before in the past when they've had Pastor Maldonado in the car. They brought in Bruno Senna at one point for a season, and Bruno just wasn't he was a great name, but he wasn't going to lead the team alongside Maldonado as a pairing. Again, you were just kind of slightly uninspired by the two of them together. Whereas that was a team that had always had a strong driver at least, and sometimes taking a risk on a rookie or giving someone a chance as well. I always used to like the mix, so it stood out when Williams had a kind of a less reliable pairing, and eventually that turned around with 2014. But as you say, they had the Mercedes power unit, and they should be competitive like that. This time round, I don't feel like it's that sort of play, because when the team was finishing third, that's good money coming in for the Constructors' Championship. When it's finishing fifth, that's still strong. But if you have a big drop, like it looks like they might this year, to potentially somewhere like eighth or ninth, the difference in prize money between those positions, is millions of dollars. That's the money that you maybe have brought in from the drivers. You've lost then in your Constructors' Championship money. So you're no better off, and all you are is less competitive, and you're then struggling to get sponsors on board. So it's momentum that's going against you, and it's very, very hard to turn around. And I did an interview with Paddy Lowe in Abu Dhabi last year and asked him about that. And he did say it was crucial that they started to build some positive momentum, because as much as the results on paper look like, stability, 2 fifth places in a row, they came off the back of 2/3, and the gap was so much bigger that they were clearly going in the wrong direction. And you've got to make changes for that. To be honest, Sorokin, I think, will surprise a few people this year. He's solid enough. I wrote him off too early, in the sense of he was named as a Sauber reserve at the age of sort of 17, I think it was, and that it looked like Sauber were going to try and fast track into F1, and that definitely was a money decision, and it all fell apart eventually. But once he reached Formula 2 at a much more realistic